It's very rare that I find myself weighing in on current gaming news. I'm not the biggest fan on that because, once again, it is time sensitive. Unfortunately, I work a day job, and as a result, I'm not afforded the luxury of being able to dedicate my availability to making timely content. The irony that my alter ego is in reference to Sonic the Hedgehog is not lost on me. Roughly about 12 days ago, at the time of this writing, Will Borger of IGN, is it Borger? Bourgeois? Whatever. Billy Burger Buns decided to review Mouse PI for Hire. Mouse PI is the latest entry from Fumi Games. It's a boomer shooter that's set in an old-school 1930s rubber hose animation style with subtle noir aesthetic. The key word here is aesthetic. Mouse PI isn't trying to be the next LA Noire. The goal of most boomer shooters, or as I prefer to call them, Doom clones, is to get from one side of the map to the other while gunning down hundreds of enemies using a wide range of weapons. Sometimes they involve completing minor objectives, but for the most part, it's really just a power fantasy. Unfortunately, Will kinda sorta missed the mark completely when making the review. Now, before I critique his work, I did in fact reach out to Will Borger for comment, but at this time he has yet to respond to me. So without further ado, let's get started on this incredibly meta review of a review. It's very apparent that Will has a passion for noir. In his video review, within the first 15 seconds, he mentions it while over top of clips from The Big Sleep, Stray Dog, Chinatown, Reservoir Dogs, Double Indemnity, etc., etc. It's in his passion for what he considers noir that Will trips over his own 2 feet and slams face first into the pavement. Unfortunately, he proceeds to stay there for the remainder of the video. At certain points, he mentions that Fumi Games made a game that is thematically incoherent with its story, which contradicts with its actual action. I mean this with about as much respect as I can give him. Will walked in with preconceived notions for what Mouse PI should be, and couldn't pivot to reflect that initial opinion. Let me briefly play devil's advocate. It's perfectly okay to walk into Mouse PI expecting it to be a more serious grindhouse experience. The original trailers and test footage could reflect something different from the final complete experience. Judging by my original viewing of his review, I would have recommended that Will pick up a copy of Fallen Aces, as that game seems to fix a lot of the criticisms Will seems to have with Mouse PI for Hire. However, it becomes apparent that Will Borger kinda has contempt for Mouse PI being a boomer shooter in general. He talks about how the player kills hundreds of enemies to the point the city would be swept clean of crime in about a week. Yeah, it's a boomer shooter. He talks about how he picks up a lot of cash from defeated enemies, but thematically you're a perpetually down on their luck private investigator. Okay, quick and easy fix. Let's swap the money with stuff that can only be accepted by vendors, like the wooden nickels from Sinners. He then brings up how he doesn't like the shotgun sound effects, stating they sound like a toy gun, but once again, I need to state that Mouse PI for Hire is a rubber hose animation style boomer shooter. This is a level of nitpicking that I feel just isn't justified. It would feel okay if these were minor gripes, but Will Borger is missing the forest for the trees here. It's a world filled with mice, but he doesn't like how everything is about cheese. Honestly, this is a fumble of a game review. Here's the gnawing question. Does Will actually make any good points in his video review? Yeah, actually. He mentions how some of the enemies you fight might be innocent people, and he feels conflicted about that. Like the opera singer you gunned down after you burn her place of work down to the ground. Yeah, I can somewhat agree with that stance. I'll play devil's advocate. Too many references or annoying writing. Sure, that is valid criticism. Sometimes when you reference too many things, it can needlessly bog down the experience. Keep in mind, all art is subjective. Mouse PI for Hire isn't for everyone, but Will gets bogged down in things that shouldn't really be high priority. If I were to write a review where I nitpick minor inconveniences I had, I would start building them up like I was doing a review version of Death by 1,000 Cuts. You can briefly mention the nitpicks as an aside while continuing your analytical critique. For example, when I reviewed Skate the Infinity last year, I went on a small nitpick about how some of the tricks and maneuvers used in key points of the show would make no logical sense. But I paired that with my co-host Harriet mentioning how that's not the point of what is essentially Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift except gay, and with skateboards. For fairness sake, I decided to watch Will's previous video game reviews with IGN. Recently, he covered a remake of Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly, as well as Reanimal, and he's a solid game critic. In my honest opinion, Will Borger's review of Mouse PI for Hire was a massive swing and a miss. A critique that will be on record as one of the most head-scratching video game reviews published by IGN. At this point, I wonder if his script didn't have an editor, or maybe he was rushed to meet a release deadline. Doesn't matter if you're a pushcart prize-nominated fiction writer/essayist. Sometimes you need an editor to challenge your argument. Either way, I probably should start working on my next video review as well. At least before Harriet murders me. Whichever comes first. I'm Matthew Tyler DeLeo, better known as SonicMTD. Arigato gozaimasu, and later days. And couldn't pivot to reflect that initial opinion. Let me bleefly, really? Okay, bleefly, alright. Sideways. See, this is why I like doing all of this just audio in post-production. Now you won't have to see a blooper reel, but here we go. All right. Doing this all in VR chat. My God, man. We have reached a level of insanity that I didn't think was possible. To fix a lot of his criticisms that he seems to have. Nope, need to do that again. By the way, in case you're wondering, this little thing right here is not a watch under the sleeve. It's actually a blue wristband. Oh God, what did I do?